The galaxy had catalogued humanity as a statistical inevitability, another emergent species from a mid-sized yellow star system, located inconveniently far from the civilized spiral lanes. Their classification within the Grand Registry of Sentient Evolution read simply, Species 7A Sol System, primitive, militarily insignificant, politically fragmented, technologically volatile, long-term viability, questionable. For over 200 standard galactic cycles, no council member had challenged that designation, until the silence began. The observation vessel, Iridescent Truth, drifted within the outer halo of the Sol system, cloaked behind the scattered debris fields of the Oort cloud. Its crystalline hull refracted the distant sunlight into a spectrum of dim auroras, invisible to primitive optical detection. Inside, the vessel pulsed with harmonic bioluminescent corridors, a neural lattice command nodes grown rather than constructed. Commander Tolrek of the Kylari Ascendancy studied the data streams flowing through his sensory crown. The crown itself was alive, a semi-sentient interface organism bonded to his cranial ridges, translating vast quantum telemetry into emotional resonance and visual abstraction. He felt discomfort. That was unusual. Kylari did not often experience unease. Their species had evolved beyond such inefficiencies. Behind him, Analyst Joravan extended her multi-jointed limbs across the hovering prism consoles. Streams of spectral glyphs spiraled outward from her touch, forming three-dimensional representations of Earth and its surrounding military infrastructure. The third perimeter grid has expanded again, she said, her voice layered with harmonic undertones native to her species. They have deployed another lattice of gravitational mines along the Kuiper exclusion. Zone Tolrek rotated one of his 4 ocular nodes toward the projection. Earth shimmered there, a vibrant sphere of blue, white, and fragile green. Beautiful, chaotic, infuriatingly resilient. They expand defensive parameters every 3.1 solar months, he observed. Yes, Commander. Yet they have not attempted interstellar expansion. No, Commander, nor initiated first contact diplomacy. Correct, nor issued hostile actions toward neighboring civilizations. Joravan hesitated, a rare sign among the Kylari. They have issued one message, she said quietly. Tolrek's neural crown flickered amber. The warning. Yes. The projection shifted, revealing the transmission that had begun rippling across galactic communication bands 18 standard cycles ago. It was simple, inelegantly simple. A human face appeared in the holographic memory, aged, scarred, stern. A military uniform adorned with insignia representing planetary unification rather than any singular nation. The message was translated into 37 known galactic languages. It had been broadcast repeatedly, with relentless clarity. The humans spoke. To any civilization observing or approaching soul space, Earth acknowledges your presence. Earth has endured prior hostile incursions. This is our final declaration. Any further attack upon Earth, its colonies, or its vessels will be considered an existential threat. The response will be absolute. The recording ended without elaboration. The first time the Galactic Council received the message, they had laughed. That laughter had since diminished into quiet argument, then into cautious monitoring, and now into anxiety. Tolrek folded 2 of his limbs behind his armored thorax, considering the data. Remind me, he said slowly. How many verified attacks has Sol endured? Joravan accessed historical logs. 3 confirmed major incursions by separate civilizations over the last 75 cycles. Additionally, 6 minor skirmish events involving unauthorized pirate fleets, and the outcomes. She paused again. Each attacking force was annihilated. Define annihilated. No survivors, no recoverable technology. In 2 recorded cases, entire armadas ceased existence within minutes of engagement. Tolrek's neural crown pulsed deeper amber, bordering on crimson thought-alert. And our intelligence divisions still categorize humanity as technologically inferior. Joravan hesitated longer this time. Yes, beyond the observation vessel, Earth rotated peacefully. From a distance, it appeared deceptively tranquil. Cities glittered along coastlines. Orbital habitats glowed like drifting constellations. Civilian trade vessels moved between Earth, Luna, and the Martian settlements with routine efficiency. But layered beneath the apparent normalcy was something new, something that had only emerged after the second incursion, when the Dravari Dominion attempted planetary resource harvesting. Human orbital infrastructure had since transformed into a labyrinth of silent war architecture. Platforms disguised as research stations, communication arrays that doubled as relativistic weapon guidance systems, and most troubling of all, the dark regions of space surrounding Earth that sensors could not penetrate, not cloaked objects, absence, regions where data itself seemed erased. Commander Joravan said cautiously, "The Council has requested updated threat analysis. Several member civilizations are considering enforcement actions." Tolrek turned all 4 ocular nodes toward her. "Enforcement. The Resk Collective claims Sol's militarization violates galactic neutral development accords. They argue Earth's warning constitutes aggressive posturing. And the Council, divided. Some believe humanity is bluffing. Others believe they are concealing prohibited technologies. And you," Joravan lowered her sensory crest, a gesture of contemplative humility. "I believe humanity is afraid." Tolrek studied the Earth projection again. Fear rarely produces such precise defensive architecture. A sudden vibration rippled through the iridescent truth. The vessel's biohull shifted color from tranquil violet to alert sapphire. Command glyphs flared across every console simultaneously. Joravan recoiled slightly. "Unscheduled signal emerging from Earth Command Net," she announced. "High-priority broadcast. Expanding toward interstellar relay bands." Projected. The holographic space before them fractured open into cascading signal layers. Encryption algorithms attempted to decode the message, but struggled against human cryptographic constructs, surprisingly sophisticated for a species still labeled emergent. Then, gradually, the translation matrix stabilized. The same human officer appeared, though older now. The scars along his face had deepened. His hair had faded to iron gray. Behind him stood a chamber filled with representatives of multiple human cultural backgrounds, military, scientific, and civilian leaders alike. It was a unified government assembly. That alone unsettled Tolrek. Historical records indicated humans had spent centuries unable to govern themselves collectively. Now they stood together. The human began speaking again. "To the Galactic Council, and any civilizations monitoring this channel. We are aware of fleet mobilizations currently assembling within Hess collective territory. We request immediate cessation of hostile positioning within Sol-adjacent space." The chamber behind him remained silent. Solemn. "We have no interest in conquest. Humanity has survived long enough to understand the cost of expansion through violence." Tolrek felt something unfamiliar stir through his neural crown, an echo of respect. The human continued, "But we have also learned from every war ever forced upon us. This transmission is not a negotiation. It is confirmation. We will not initiate aggression. But if aggression reaches Earth again," he paused. The silence stretched. Every observation network across the galaxy tuned in. Billions of sentient beings watched. The human's voice lowered, not louder, not angrier, simply heavier. "The response will extend beyond your fleet, beyond your worlds, beyond your species." The chamber lighting dimmed slightly, casting shadows across his features. "We do not want that outcome. We are asking one final time for peace." The transmission ended. Silence consumed the iridescent truth command chamber. Joravan slowly exhaled through her respiratory spiracles. "That was not a bluff," she whispered. Tolrek remained motionless. "No," he said quietly. "It was a warning delivered by a species that has already decided what it will do if ignored." Moments later, galactic communication networks erupted. Council chambers flooded with emergency debates. Military alliances fractured into factions. Economic unions began evacuating trade routes near Sol. And deep within Resk collective territory, massive hive fleets began accelerating toward human space. Joravan turned back toward the tactical projection, her limbs trembling slightly. "Commander, if they attack..." Tolrek studied the expanding fleet signatures moving across the star charts. For the first time in his long service to the Ascendancy, he felt genuine dread. Then, he said slowly, "We will finally learn what humanity has been hiding." Outside the vessel, Earth continued spinning peacefully beneath its thin atmosphere. Children laughed in coastal cities. Artists painted under lunar skylines. Engineers quietly worked within orbital shipyards no alien sensor could fully observe. And deep beneath Earth's crust, sealed beneath kilometers of mantle and forgotten war bunkers, something ancient and patient stirred as automated systems awakened from centuries-long dormancy. Across countless classified facilities, human command keys began activating one by one. Protocols older than the unified Earth government itself. Protocols never revealed to any alien intelligence. Protocols labeled simply, "Last Light Directive" within Hesk territory. Millions of biomechanical warships ignited their propulsion cores, their collective consciousness chanting victory probabilities across subspace networks. They believed Earth would fall like every young species before it. They believed humanity's warning was desperation. They believed their numbers guaranteed triumph. They were wrong, but they would not realize it until they crossed the invisible boundary surrounding the Sol system, a boundary humanity had spent decades preparing, and centuries fearing. And as the first Resk Armada entered faster-than-light transit toward Earth, sensors across the galaxy recorded something else awakening within Sol space. Not a fleet, not a weapon, something far older, something humanity itself barely understood. The Kylari Ascendancy had a proverb: when a world grows silent, it is either dead or listening. Commander Tolrek watched the Sol system through the observation lattice of the iridescent truth and felt the proverb's weight settle into his bones. Earth was not dead. Its biosphere flared with heat signatures, communication chatter, civilian traffic, and the steady heartbeat of a living planet. And yet something about it was silent. Not in sound, not in signals, silent in intent. It was as if the world had learned to keep its deepest thoughts folded inward. Beyond the command chamber's translucent walls, the vessel's living corridors hummed a low, soothing resonance to keep crew instincts from spiraling into panic. Kylari ships were designed to regulate emotion and elegant control. Still, Tolerek's neural crown flickered with a persistent amber, the color of unresolved threat. Joravan returned from the long-range sensor alcove with an updated package of intercepted transmissions. The Council has convened an emergency assembly, she reported. The Hesk Collective refuses to halt mobilization. Their speaker hive submitted a formal declaration. Sol must be disarmed for the protection of galactic equilibrium. Equilibrium, Tolrek repeated, tasting the irony. The galaxy's equilibrium was maintained by the strong, those whose fleets could enforce law at the edge of known space, and those whose economies could starve lesser worlds into submission without firing a beam. Humanity, by every metric, had been deemed too fractured, too young, too emotionally volatile to matter. It was why the first incursion had happened, and why the second had escalated, and why the third had ended with a mystery so complete it frightened even the most arrogant council factions. Tolrek motioned with a forelimb. Bring up the historical record again, all of it. I want to see the pattern. The prism consoles brightened. The Sol system expanded in holographic layers, inner planets, asteroid belt, Jovian moons, then the cold architecture of the Kuiper exclusion zone. Overlaid upon it were 3 red scars, markers of invasion vectors. Joravan's voice softened into the tone used for memorial recitations. First verified incursion. The Kethvar Syndicate, 74 cycles ago. The projection shifted. A swarm of small craft appeared, pirate vessels, scavengers, opportunists. They had been drawn by early human radio leakage, chaotic broadcasts of war, commerce, entertainment, and distress. The pirates had assumed the world was ripe. They entered orbit above Earth, initiated mass communications, demanded tribute, and began abduction operations from coastal regions. Joravan recited. Tolrek watched the simulation of those first days. Human aircraft, primitive, combustion-driven, limited rows to meet them and died in burning arcs. Cities screamed with missile flares. The Kethvar laughed and harvested. Then the record stuttered. The pirate vessels, hundreds of them, simply vanished. No explosion bloom, no debris signature, no radiation spike. They were present one moment, absent the next. The Council's best analysts had never explained it. Second incursion, Tolrek said. The Dravari Dominion, 41 cycles ago. Dravari ships were vast, ancient, plated with layered alloy and arrogance, a resource-hunger empire. They did not raid. They claimed Earth's oceans, rare earth metals, microbial biodiversity. Everything was catalogued as Dominion property. They deployed orbital harvest towers and established a blockade of Luna and Mars. Joravan continued. Humanity attempted negotiation. Dominion response. Execution of human envoys. In the simulation, a small human vessel approached the Dravari flagship under a flag of truce. A beam lanced out. The vessel broke apart like a fragile egg. The record showed Earth's next action. An intense surge of electromagnetic output from underground sites across the planet. Then again, the Dravari towers collapsed inward as if gravity itself had shifted. Their fleet lost cohesion. Ships drifting, then folding, then gone. Gone so completely that not even exotic matter residue remained. The Dominion's frontier worlds reported a subspace scream. Joravan added, a burst of corrupted signals that drove certain Dravari hive mains into madness, but no one could trace it to Sol. And the third? Tolrek asked, though he already knew. The third was the one that had changed the Council's laughter into discomfort. The Avail Concordat, Joravan said. They believed Earth was a strategic blind spot. They did not seek resources, they sought leverage. In the projection, elegant Avail ships, sleek, white, ceremonial, slid into Sol space with the confidence of diplomats, but their holds carried soldiers. Their emissaries carried lies. They offered humanity protection, demanded exclusive trade, demanded that Earth accept guidance under Concordat oversight. It was colonialism dressed in silk. Humanity refused. The Concordat then targeted Mars, bombarded the young colonies to force surrender without shattering Earth's biosphere. In the record, Mars domes ruptured, red dust swallowed habitats, thousands died in minutes, and then the impossible happened. Every Avail ship detonated simultaneously, not in thermal fire, but in a cold bloom of light that resembled a star's first heartbeat. The explosion signatures did not match antimatter, fusion, or singularity weapons. They looked like reality itself had torn. The Council's official report called it an unknown catastrophic failure event, but no one believed that. Not anymore. Tolrek stared at the bright scars on the hologram. 3 invasions, 3 total annihilation, and yet Earth remains catalogued as primitive. Joravan's crest dipped. Political convenience. The Council cannot admit misclassification. It would undermine their authority, and it would force them to ask what else they have underestimated. Tolrek murmured. To understand how the galaxy could be so blind, one had to understand the galaxy itself. The Galactic Council was not a unified empire. It was a sprawling, fragile agreement between civilizations that had grown tired of open war. Their peace was maintained through treaties, trade sanctions, and the threat of collective military response. In theory, it was enlightened governance. In practice, it was hierarchy. At the top sat the eldest species, those who had achieved interstellar travel before most stars in the spiral had cooled their first planets. The Kylari ascendancy was among them, disciplined, scientific, careful. Their ships were grown from living crystal matrices that could heal, adapt, and interface with minds. The Resk collective sat near the top as well, not for refinement but for sheer mass. They were a hive species, billions of bodies controlled by layered consensus networks. Their fleets were industrial swarms, built quickly, replaced quickly. They believed existence was a competition of consumption and reproduction. The Virid Dominion controlled the hyperlane choke points. The Lumen courts held cultural influence. The Thessary guilds controlled banking, and beneath them sat the younger species, admitted to council protections but treated like children, guided, restricted, sometimes exploited. Humanity had been slated for that lower tier. If they survived, they were volatile. Their early centuries of radio leakage had been a carnival of violence and wonder. Wars broadcast live, speeches of unity, songs of grief, the roar of rockets, the quiet sobbing of astronauts who saw Earth from orbit and realized how small it was. Aliens had listened and decided, too emotional, too divided, too unpredictable. The Council's development accords were designed for such. Species's observe, contain, prevent them from obtaining dangerous technologies too quickly, protect them from predators, unless predators offered profitable exceptions, and Sol had been far from Council oversight, which meant predators came first. The iridescent truth drifted closer to the boundary humans had marked as exclusion. The Kuiper zone was littered with ice, rock, and something else. Thousands of objects that looked like natural debris until one studied their motion. They weren't debris, they were mines, not explosive mines. Something stranger. Gravitational anchors. Instruments that could alter local space curvature, creating invisible tripwires in the fabric of motion itself. Joravan highlighted one of the objects. Human designation, Sentry Node K1147. It emits no signals. It only activates when mass thresholds cross certain vectors. What happens when it activates? Tolrek asked. Joravan's limbs hesitated over the console. We do not know. No one has triggered one and returned to report. Tolrek felt the warning coil tighter around his thoughts. We should not be here, a junior sense adept whispered from the rear alcove, his voice trembling. Commander, our cloak is stable, but I feel as if something is watching. Kylari rarely spoke of instinct. They considered it a primitive relic, but even their species retained deep evolutionary patterns. Tolrek did not dismiss the fear. He had felt it too, a sensation like standing before an abyss that might suddenly open its eyes. "Keep the cloak tight," he ordered. "No emissions, not even passive reflections." The adept nodded quickly, fingers fluttering across organic control veins. As the iridescent truth slid through the cold outskirts, Earth's inner system came into sharper focus. Human satellites glittered like a halo. Their shipyards near Luna were enormous industrial rings humming with construction. Their vessels, though limited to sublight travel, were sleek and functional, built with a utilitarian grace. But what unsettled Tolrek was not what he saw, it was what he could not. There were gaps in sensor coverage over certain regions of space, as if the fabric of detection itself had been eaten. Not cloaks left signatures. These were voids. Within those voids, something moved, occasionally mass disturbances, gravitational ripples, and faint time dilation artifacts. "Those are not human ships," Joravan whispered, almost reverently. "At least, not ships as we understand them." "Then what are they?" the junior adept asked. Tolrek stared at the sensor void, and the memory of the 3 annihilated fleets pressed into his mind like a warning brand. "I do not know," he said, "but I suspect humanity doesn't entirely know either." Far below, on Earth, the last light directive awakened, but not with alarms or panic, with ritual. In a subterranean chamber beneath what humans once called the Himalayas, a vault door larger than an orbital dock slid open with a sigh of ancient hydraulics. Air that had not moved in centuries rushed out like a held breath. Inside, the lights were dim, their power stored in vault cells older than most human nations had been. A human woman stepped into the chamber, her boots echoing on metal grating. She wore no ornate uniform, only a simple field jacket with a single patch, a star encircled by a broken chain. Her name was Admiral Leona Sato, Supreme Defense Coordinator of Unified Earth. She paused at the threshold and closed her eyes. Behind her, a young officer barely old enough to have seen the old war footage held a datapad trembling in his hands. "Ma'am," he said, voice tight, "the Council fleets are moving. Kresk will reach our outer boundary in 36 hours. Leona opened her eyes. They were tired eyes, not afraid, just heavy with the knowledge of what had already been paid. 36 hours, she repeated softly. She stepped forward into the vault. The chamber's center held a structure like a black obelisk, its surface matte and seamless, no markings, no seams. It did not resemble human engineering. It did not resemble alien engineering either. It resembled something that did not belong in this universe. Leona placed her hand against it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the obelisk responded not with light, but with sound, a deep, low note that vibrated through bone and memory. It was less a tone than a presence, like the hum of a sleeping god. The young officer stepped back, swallowing hard. "Ma'am, that thing." Leona did not remove her hand. "It's awake," she whispered. "So it begins." Above, in orbit, human fleets that had been hidden in plain sight began reconfiguring. Cargo haulers unfolded into weapons platforms. Research stations rotated to reveal gun spines. The civilian traffic lanes quietly rerouted, not in panic, but in practiced choreography. And across the galaxy, the Kresk hive mind sang of conquest, blind to the fact that Earth's final warning had never been bravado. It had been mercy. Back aboard the iridescent truth, Commander Tolrek's sensors caught the first undeniable sign that something had changed. A pulse rippled out from Earth, not electromagnetic, not gravitic, not subspace, something deeper. The vessel's living hull shuddered, as if reacting to a predator's scent. Joravan's voice was barely audible. "Commander, that pulse just reached the void regions," and the sensor projection flickered. Inside the detection gaps, a shape briefly appeared, vast, impossibly angular, like a shadow cut into the geometry of space. It was there for less than a heartbeat, and then it was gone. But the iridescent truth had recorded enough to terrify. The junior adept whispered a single phrase, not in Kylery, but in the human language he had learned from intercepted transmissions, words that had echoed through Earth's history whenever old nightmares returned. "It's coming." Commander Tolrek did not correct him. He only stared at Earth, and realized with cold certainty, humanity was not preparing to defend itself like a young species. Humanity was preparing to unleash something it had kept chained for a very long time, and the Kresk fleet was already in transit. Across the spiral arm, faster than light shockwaves rippled outward as the Kresk collective war swarm tore through folded space toward the Sol system. Their transit signatures burned like scars across the subspace monitoring grids used by dozens of civilizations. Entire star systems dimmed their communication networks to avoid interference from the sheer gravitational turbulence generated by the swarm's passage. Trade routes shuttered, diplomatic couriers diverted course. Even ancient empires with fleets older than human civilization paused to watch. The Resk did not travel quietly, they never had. Where refined civilizations navigated hyperlanes like surgeons, the Resk moved like locusts, storms thousands of vessels pushing through transit corridors simultaneously, overwhelming natural spatial resistance through sheer mass and synchronized drive resonance. Within the swarms of Central Command vessel-designated brood, sovereign Kazal, the collective consciousness of nearly 9 billion Resk minds pulsed in unified anticipation. The brood chamber was a living cathedral of nervines, armored chitin pillars, and floating sensory orbs that translated distant telemetry into pheromenal command signals. Thousands of drone bodies hung from the chamber walls, each connected to the greater hive intelligence through translucent neural tethers. At the chamber's core floated the Speaker Prime, a towering mass of layered exoskeleton and bioluminescent nerve nodes, its thoughts broadcast simultaneously across the entire swarm. The Speaker Prime did not speak with words alone. It spoke with certainty. Soul resists harmony. Soul rejects guidance. Soul demonstrates prohibited technological accumulation. Soul must be neutralized to preserve collective continuity. Across the swarm, the directive echoed like sacred doctrine. Victory was not simply expected, it was statistically guaranteed. The Resk had faced young species before, thousands of them across recorded galactic history. Every emergent civilization followed predictable psychological arcs: fear, panic, fractured resistance, eventual capitulation. Humanity's warning had been analyzed extensively by Resk probability engines. The conclusion had been unanimous: bluff. Yet even within the brood sovereign, minor anomalies flickered across the shared consciousness, sun-resolved data fragments from the 3 prior soul engagements. Entire fleets vanishing without measurable energy output contradicted known physical laws. The collective had devoted immense processing power to resolving those anomalies. Their final conclusion had been simple: unknown human weapon utilizing singular catastrophic discharge. Such weapons, by known theoretical limits, could not be deployed repeatedly without destabilizing planetary infrastructure. Thus, the collective reasoned, humanity possessed a single-use deterrent, and deterrents, once triggered, lost their power. Inside the iridescent truth, Commander Tolrek watched the incoming swarm vector with tightening unease. The holographic projection of soul space glowed in layered colors: civilian evacuation lanes in green, human military repositioning in gold, and the advancing Resk transit shockwave in crimson. "They are accelerating," Joravan reported. "Estimated emergence from faster-than-light transit, 22 standard hours." Tolrek turned toward the sensor voids again, the regions of detection, absence orbiting far beyond. "Pluto, any movement inside the void zones?" he asked. "Intermittent," she replied. "Mass fluctuations, inconsistent with known ship propulsion. The disturbances resemble tidal shifts." "Tidal shifts of what?" Joravan did not answer immediately. "Space itself, Commander." The junior sensordept shuddered visibly. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The council chamber floated within the hollowed interior of a neutron-stabilized megastructure orbiting the white giant star Illith Dotter. Representatives of 112 civilizations occupied crystalline thrones arranged in ascending rings, their forms ranging from liquid intellect matrices to towering energy-based entities bound within containment halos. At the chamber's center shimmered a volumetric projection of Sol system, and within it 2 opposing forces: human defensive grids, Resk invasion vectors. The Lumen Court emissary radiated pale azure light as she addressed the assembly. "The collective violates development accords," she stated. "Sol has not initiated aggression. The invasion lacks legal justification." The Via Dominion warlord encased in an armored exorcial forged from starship hull plating responded with grinding resonance. "Sol violates technological containment protocols. Their annihilation of 3 fleets demonstrates possession of band-dimensional armaments. They used those armaments in self-defense," countered the Thesari Guild delegate, their crystalline tendrils flickering with economic concern. "If Sol falls, the precedent destabilizes every emergent trade zone." The chamber erupted into overlapping transmissions. Only one species remained silent: the Kylari Ascendancy. Their throne remained dark, awaiting Commander Tolrek's remote input from the observation vessel. The Council demanded clarity, and the Kylari had always been trusted to provide truth. Within the Himalaya vault, Admiral Leona Sato stood before the black obelisk as cascading data streams poured across her retinal implants. She absorbed them without flinching, though each update carved another fracture into her already burdened conscience. Behind her, Earth's Unified Defense Command assembled in layered holographic presence, fleet admirals in orbit, planetary governors, scientific oversight councils, civilian leadership representatives, and emergency humanitarian directors. They watched her in silence, not because of rank, because of history. Leona was one of the last surviving officers from the Davari War. She had been present when human envoys died under false diplomatic protection. She had watched Mars burn. She had been among those who authorized the activation of the unknown weapon recovered decades earlier during humanity's first accidental deep space excavation. The weapon they had never fully understood, the weapon they had sworn never to use again. Until now. Status, she said quietly. Fleet Admiral Rohan Calder's projection stabilized beside her. Evacuation of outer colonies proceeding at 92% completion. Civilian transport corridors clear. Lunar shipyards fully converted to defensive output. Mars remains combat-ready. Leona nodded. And Project Prometheus, she asked. A ripple passed through the command network. Even veteran officers shifted uneasily at the name. Dr. Elian Morrow appeared next, his lab coat replaced by emergency command uniform. His face was pale, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Prometheus, synchronization at 87%, he reported. The lattice is forming, but we are still calibrating resonance thresholds. If we trigger prematurely, I know the risks. Leona interrupted gently. He swallowed. You don't understand, Admiral. We are still not certain what the lattice actually does beyond what it did during prior activations. She turned toward him fully. I understand enough, she said. It ends wars. His silence was not agreement. Above Earth, hidden within the detection voids, human engineers moved through structures that resembled neither ships nor stations. They were frameworks of impossible geometry, vast rings intersecting at non-Euclidean angles, each segment constructed from a material that absorbed light rather than reflected it. The lattice. It had taken humanity 40 years to reconstruct fragments of alien technology discovered beneath the Pacific Ocean during the Kethvar aftermath. 40 years of experimentation. 40 years of terrifying near-disasters as prototype segments folded localized reality into lethal paradoxes. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself learning how to assemble the lattice, and they still did not know its full origin. They only knew what it responded to: threat magnitude and moral authorization. Every prior activation required unanimous planetary consent. Leona had once sworn she would never request that consent again, but now she prepared to. On Mars, survivors of the Concordat bombardment watched the sky through reinforced dome glass. The red planet's population had grown resilient, hardened by memory. Children learned orbital threat recognition alongside mathematics. Memorial fields stretched across entire valleys, names etched into titanium monoliths that gleamed under thin sunlight. Governor Tomas Alvarez addressed his planetary assembly through broadcast towers anchored into Olympus Mons. People of Mars, he began, his voice carrying both steel and sorrow. We have received confirmation. The collective approaches. The crowd below remained still. No screaming, no panic, just listening. We remember what they did to us, he continued. We remember the lies, we remember the fire falling from orbit, and we remember who stood beside us when the sky turned red. He paused, looking toward Earth, a faint blue star rising beyond the Martian horizon. Today, Earth asks for our vote. A massive holographic interface unfolded across the sky above the crowd. Global Consensus Protocol Last Light, Authorization 3. Options glowed. Authorize, delay, reject. The silence stretched across Mars like a held breath. Back aboard the iridescent Truth, Tolrek's crown flared suddenly with urgent telemetry. Commander, Joravan cried. Presk transit wave collapsing, imminent. The projection flared as faster than light rupture points, ignited across Sol's outer boundary. Space tore open. The first Resk warships burst into real space like iron meteors punching through water. Thousands followed, forming a living storm of armored hulls, weapon spines, and drone deployment clusters. The swarm darkened the diafield. The Speaker Prime's consciousness flooded every vessel simultaneously. Sol will submit or be consumed. Within seconds, Kresk scanning arrays deployed across the Kuiper zone, mapping defensive grids, calculating firing solutions, cataloging gravitational anomalies. Their confidence lasted exactly 11 seconds. That was how long it took for the first sentry node to activate. From the perspective of the Resk Vanguard fleet, nothing visible occurred. There was no explosion, no warning, no energy discharge. Instead, one of the lead battleships simply stretched its hull, elongated impossibly, like molten metal pulled across infinity. Then it compressed inward, folding into itself until its entire mass collapsed into a single glowing point, smaller than a drone vessel. The point flickered, then vanished. Every Resk sensor array screamed contradictory data simultaneously. Mass readings impossible, temporal readings reversed, causality chains fractured. Across the swarm, confusion rippled for the first time in collective history. Anomaly detected. Unknown physics event. Recalculating, another sentry node activated. Then, another. Within moments, entire clusters of Resk ships were being erased from existence, not by force, but by something far more terrifying. They were being removed from the universe's mathematical equation. Inside the Brood Sovereign, the Speaker Prime roared through pheromonal command channels. Adapt, advance, override anomaly. The swarm surged forward, sacrificing outer ranks to breach the invisible minefield. Their numbers remained overwhelming, but now, for the first time, their probability engines began registering negative variance. Back on Earth, Admiral Sato received the update through her neural interface. Resk casualties, 5% and climbing, Calder reported. Not enough, she replied. Dr. Moreau stepped forward urgently. Admiral, the lattice synchronization has reached 95%. But once we activate global consensus, there is no reversing it. The system will fully awaken. Leona closed her eyes. She could still hear the screams from Mars decades earlier, still see the debris of the Dravari Envoy vessel drifting through vacuum after being executed. Mid-negotiation she opened her eyes again, and they were steady. Begin the vote. Across Earth, Mars, Luna, orbital habitats, asteroid colonies, and hidden deep space installations, billions of humans received the authorization request simultaneously. It appeared on civilian holoscreens, military HUDs, agricultural drone consoles, and children's educational tablets. 3 options: authorize, delay, reject. Across continents and colonies, people stared at the choices that could decide the fate of not just humanity, but possibly entire alien civilizations. Votes began registering, slowly, then faster, then in overwhelming waves. Inside the iridescent truth, Tolrek watched the human consensus counter rise. What are they voting for? The junior adept whispered. Tolrek did not answer. He only watched Earth, and felt an ancient predator stirring behind its quiet oceans and cities. Within minutes, the vote reached 99% authorization. The final threshold approached. Deep within the Himalayan vault, the black obelisk pulsed brighter, its surface beginning to fracture into lines of impossible light. The chamber temperature dropped, as if reality itself recoiled from what was about to awaken. Admiral Sato placed both hands against the obelisk. Last light directive, she said softly, voice carrying through every command channel across human space. Activation pending. Above Sol, the lattice structures hidden in sensor voids began aligning, their impossible angles rotating into harmonic resonance with the obelisk below. And beyond the Kuiper boundary, the Resk swarm surged forward, unaware they had already crossed the point of no return. The final vote registered, 100% authorization. The obelisk responded, and across the galaxy, every monitoring network recorded a single, impossible phenomenon. For one brief, chilling moment, the Sol system disappeared from spacetime maps entirely. For exactly 0.47 seconds, the Sol system ceased to exist within the observable universe, not destroyed, not cloaked, removed. Every stellar chart across the Galactic Council collapsed into computational panic. Navigation A is reported star collapse. Long-range observatories lost gravitational anchors. Trade convoys experienced spatial drift as hyperlane reference points flickered out of continuity. Then Sol returned, but it returned different. Inside the Brood, Sovereign Zell, the Speaker Prime's unified consciousness screamed across 9 billion linked Resk minds as their targeting arrays attempted to reacquire Earth. They could see the star, they could see the planets, but nothing else behaved according to known physics. The Kuiper minefield no longer appeared as isolated nodes. It had reorganized into a massive, rotating geometric lattice stretching across billions of kilometers. Each node pulsed with a dark resonance, bending light, gravity, and even time curvature into slow, rhythmic oscillations. To the Resk, it felt like flying toward a predator's open jaw. "Advance," the Speaker Prime commanded, forcing stability through the swarm's rising panic pheromones. Resk doctrine permitted no retreat from designated conquest zones. Thousands of warships surged forward, deploying shield swarms, anti-dimensional disruptors, and entropy-dampening arrays designed for confronting forbidden technologies. Their weapons activated in synchronized brilliance lances of stellar plasma, singularity torpedoes, relativistic rail clusters, all converging on the expanding lattice barrier. The result was immediate and horrifying. Every weapon beam slowed as it approached the lattice, not weakened, slowed. Each discharge elongated, stretched into impossible ribbons of frozen light, suspended in space like glass sculptures. Mid-explosion, the torpedoes halted, spinning gently, their singularity core locked in static orbit around themselves. The Resk had not encountered defense, they had encountered law alteration. Aboard the iridescent Truth, Commander Tolrek felt his neural crown ignite in cascading overload warnings. Commander Jorovin shouted, "Fundamental constants within soul space are fluctuating. Local gravitational ratio is increasing by 0.003% per second. That is impossible," the junior adept gasped. "Those are universal constants." "Not anymore," Tolrek whispered. The observation vessel's living hull rippled in distress, its biological architecture struggling to adapt to subtle changes in space-time curvature. Even from their cloaked vantage, they were feeling the edge of the phenomenon. "Record everything," Tolrek ordered hoarsely. "The Council must see this." Deep beneath the Himalayas, Admiral Leona Sato stood before the obelisk as it unfolded into an intricate spiral of floating black segments. The structure emitted no light. Instead, it absorbed illumination around it, warping shadows into layered geometries that hurt to observe directly. Dr. Moreau trembled beside her as cascading diagnostics flooded his interface. "It's expanding beyond projection models," he said, voice cracking. "The lattice is synchronizing with something outside our dimensional spectrum." Leona did not look away from the obelisk. "Status of civilian zones?" she asked. "Protected," Fleet Admiral Calder confirmed through projection. "The lattice curvature is isolating combat vectors away from populated regions. It's selecting engagement parameters autonomously." Dr. Moreau swallowed hard. "We never programmed ethical prioritization into it." Leona's voice dropped to a whisper. "We didn't have to. The truth of the lattice had never been fully shared with humanity's population, not even with most of its leadership, because humanity did not build it. They found it. 78 years earlier, an experimental deep-sea mining expedition, searching for geothermal rare elements, had uncovered a buried structure beneath the Pacific tectonic shelf. At first, scientists believed it to be a meteor fragment. Then the fragment unfolded. Within the chamber it revealed, archaeologists discovered machinery older than Earth's oldest fossil layer structures preserved in materials that defied corrosion, entropy, and geological pressure. Embedded within those ruins was the obelisk, and encoded inside the obelisk were fragments of language, fragments that described something called the Aegis Protocol. The text was incomplete, damaged by unimaginable age, but the surviving segments carried one repeating directive: Sentinel. Civilizations must preserve cosmic equilibrium against extinction-level predation. Humanity had argued for decades over whether the artifact was a weapon, a warning, or a test left behind by a vanished species older than any known galactic civilization. They never reached consensus, until the Dravari incursion. When Dravari forces executed Earth's diplomatic envoys, humanity activated the artifact for the first time. They learned two things that day. First, the artifact responded only to unified planetary consent. Second, the artifact was not designed to destroy enemies. It was designed to erase threats from possibility itself. Back in Sol orbit, the lattice completed its alignment. Across billions of kilometers, hidden black geometries rotated into harmonic resonance with the Himalayan obelisk. The result was silent, but cataclysmic. The laws governing motion inside Sol space shifted by infinitesimal margins. Margins small enough to preserve planetary orbits, biological function, and human technology, but catastrophic to external weapon systems not calibrated to the new constants. Resk targeting algorithms collapsed instantly. Entire firing solutions produced paradoxical outcomes. Weapons predicted to fire before being armed. Impact coordinates existing before projectiles launched. Energy dispersal equations dividing by zero. Inside the brood's sovereign, panic pheromones reached levels never recorded in collective history. Recalculate, reconfigure, adapt. The swarm attempted to brute force the lattice with sheer numerical advantage. Drone waves surged forward, sacrificing millions of vessels in layered assault formations designed to overwhelm defensive complexity. The first wave crossed the inner boundary. Every drone vessel instantly slowed to a crawl, as if moving through solid crystal. Hulls began distorting under temporal shear, aging and reversing age simultaneously. Metal surfaces bloomed with oxidation patterns that vanished moments later. Internal reactor cores entered feedback loops as time flow variants desynchronized fuel consumption and containment fields. Then they began disappearing, not exploding, not collapsing, vanishing in sequential slices, each ship removed along probability lines until nothing remained but faint echoes of trajectories that had never occurred. Commander Tolrek staggered as his crown flooded with data he struggled to comprehend. "They're not killing them," he whispered. Joravon stared at the projection in horror. "They're correcting them." "What do you mean?" She highlighted telemetry from vanishing Hresk vessels. "The ships are being removed from all future timelines, branching from their current vector. It's not destruction. It's preemptive erasure." The junior adept began trembling uncontrollably. "That violates every causal law." "Exactly," Tolrek said. Within the Galactic Council chamber, representatives watched the unfolding battle in stunned silence. Entire Hesk flotillas vanished from existence faster than they could be tracked. Not a single debris field formed. No radiation, no escape pods, just absence. The Via Dominion warlord's armored form cracked under stress as he transmitted. "This is annihilation beyond warfare. This is species termination." The Lumin emissary responded quietly. "No, it is something worse. It is judgment." Inside the Himalayan vault, alarms erupted across human command channels. Admiral Calder shouted, "The lattice is expanding containment range automatically. It's pushing beyond the Kuiper boundary." Leona's breath caught. "How far?" "Projected expansion. Outer Oort cloud." Dr. Moreau stared at his interface in dawning terror. If it expands further, it could engulf the Hresk staging systems still outside Sol. Entire star systems could fall within its probability correction field. Silence filled the chamber. Leona closed her eyes again, feeling the weight of billions of alien lives balanced against the survival of her species. She spoke softly. "Can we limit the expansion?" Moreau hesitated. "We might be able to negotiate with it." She opened her eyes sharply. "Negotiate with it." His hands shook. "The artifact responds to moral consensus. It's not an automated weapon. It's a guardian system. It evaluates existential threat levels and adjusts force proportionally. But it's interpreting the Hresk invasion as total extinction-level aggression. And if it decides extinction is the only solution?" she asked. He did not answer. Above Sol, the Hresk swarm launched its final escalation. Desperation replaced doctrine. The Speaker Prime ordered deployment of the Worldbreaker Arraya, forbidden. Collective weapon reserved only for extermination campaigns against ancient rival species. Thousands of Hresk ships sacrificed their reactor cores simultaneously, linking them into a single gravitational implosion engine designed to collapse Sol's star into premature supernova detonation. Even from distant observation, the energy buildup was apocalyptic. Commander Tolrek's crown flashed crimson emergency. Commander Joravin cried, "If that weapon triggers, Sol will die. The lattice may fail under stellar collapse conditions." Tolrek watched the converging energy signatures and felt his species' deepest instincts whisper a terrible realization. Humanity had built the lattice to defend themselves, but the Hresk were about to force it into full retaliatory judgment mode, and if the lattice escalated fully, it might not stop at the invading fleet. It might decide the entire Hesk species represented existential predation. Across the galaxy, trillions of Hresk civilians brood worlds, nursery systems, agricultural high-V planets would vanish from existence in a cascading chain of retroactive correction. Genocide not through war, through mathematical deletion. In the Himalayan vault, Admiral Leona Sato felt the obelisk vibrate beneath her hands, as if sensing her thoughts. The Last Light Directive had never been intended as humanity's ultimate weapon. It had been intended as their final shield. But shields could become swords when pushed too far. she whispered into the command channel, voice breaking with the weight of responsibility. "Open communication with the lattice intelligence." Dr. Morrow stared at her. "You don't know if it can even understand language." Leona closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against the dark surface. "It understood our fear," she said. "Now it needs to understand our mercy." Outside, the Fresk Worldbreaker array reached ignition threshold. Across Sol, stars seemed to dim as gravitational pressure warped local spacetime toward catastrophic collapse. And within the expanding lattice, ancient systems older than civilization itself prepared to deliver final judgment upon an entire species. The fate of two civilizations, and possibly the moral foundation of the entire galaxy, balanced on whether humanity could convince a godlike relic of forgotten creators to spare their enemy. The Sol system trembled under forces that had not existed since the birth of stars. Across the void, the Fresk Worldbreaker array ignited. Thousands of Fresk warships ruptured their own fusion hearts simultaneously, linking gravitational collapse fields into a singular cascading vortex. The combined implosion engine began bending the heliosphere inward, warping solar plasma streams and distorting the delicate gravitational equilibrium holding the planets in their eternal dance. The sun itself began to shudder. Solar prominences stretched unnaturally, pulled into spiraling arcs toward the forming singularity wave. Radiation output spiked beyond stellar norms. Mercury's orbit jittered. Jupiter's massive gravity wells rippled with subtle but catastrophic irregularity. To every monitoring civilization across the galaxy, it looked like Sol's star was beginning to die. Inside the brood, Sovereign Kazel, the Speaker Prime, flooded the collective with a singular, triumphant directive. If Sol cannot be consumed, Sol will be erased from cosmic balance. The Fresk had abandoned conquest. They had chosen annihilation. Within the expanding human lattice, the ancient system reacted instantly. The dark geometric structures orbiting Sol pulsed with harmonic resonance that rippled outward like invisible thunder. Every lattice node adjusted alignment in response to the stellar threat. Their angular segments rotating through dimensions human mathematics could barely describe. For the first time since activation, the lattice emitted something resembling communication. Not sound, not signal, a pressure against consciousness itself. Commander Tolrek collapsed to one knee inside the iridescent truth as his neural crown screamed in overload. Joravan clutched her sensory arrays, trembling as alien impressions flooded her mind like tidal waves of impossible language. The junior adept sobbed openly. What is it saying?" he gasped. Tolrak struggled to remain conscious as fragments of meaning clawed through his perception. "It is evaluating," he whispered. "Evaluating what?" "Everything deep beneath the Himalayas." Admiral Leona Sato felt the same presence but clearer. The obelisk was no longer cold. It vibrated with a low, harmonic pulse that resonated directly with her neural implants. Symbols formed in her mind, ancient, alien, yet somehow understood beyond translation. A voice emerged, not spoken, remembered. "Sentinel species confirmed. Extinctional species confirmed. Extinction-level predator event detected. Total correction authorized." Leona's breath caught. "No," she whispered aloud. Dr. Moreau stared at her in terror. "Admiral, what is it telling you?" Her hands pressed harder against the shifting surface as tears burned behind her eyes. "It wants to erase the Fresk," she said. Silence fell across the command chamber like a funeral veil. Fleet Admiral Calder's voice trembled through the projection. "All of them, yes," she said, barely audible. "Not just the fleet, the entire species. Past, present, possibly even their historical probability chain." Morrow staggered backward, pale as death. "That's not defense. That's godhood," Leona finished. Above Sol, the Fresk Worldbreaker array crossed ignition threshold. Gravitational collapse waves surged toward the sun, compressing solar plasma into unstable density. Stellar fusion chains faltered, threatening runaway detonation. The star flickered between normal output and catastrophic overload in violent pulses visible across half the galaxy. Planets trembled within their orbital tracks. Human fleets deployed emergency stabilization grids, but even their advanced technologies were dwarfed by the scale of stellar manipulation unfolding before them. And still, the Fresk advanced. The collective knew they were losing ships by the millions, but their hive mind doctrine demanded completion of the extinction strike. Sacrifice of drones was irrelevant to species survival. They did not understand they were about to sacrifice something far greater. Inside the lattice, ancient algorithms reached final judgment parameters. Probability chains spanning millions of years unfurled across dimensions, unseen by physical observers. The system analyzed the Hresk species' evolutionary patterns, expansion history, war doctrine, and future predictive threat models. Every simulation concluded the same. The Hresk collective would never stop expanding. They would never stop consuming. Given sufficient time, they would eradicate countless emergent civilizations across the galaxy. The lattice prepared the solution: total probability correction. Leona felt the decision forming before it was executed. She slammed her fist against the obelisk, screaming into the impossible presence flooding her mind. No. The chamber shook as lattice resonance intensified, reacting to her emotional surge. "You do not get to decide extinction," she shouted, voice cracking with fury and grief. "Not for them, not for anyone." The presence paused. For the first time since activation, the harmonic vibration shifted into uncertainty. Sentinel objection detected. Explanation required. Leona swallowed hard, forcing her shaking hands to steady against the shifting black surface. "They attacked us," she said. "They killed millions. They're trying to destroy our star. Yes, they are a threat." Her voice softened. "But extinction isn't balance. It's surrender to fear." Dr. Moreau whispered behind her, stunned by her defiance of something older than civilizations themselves. Leona closed her eyes, memories flooding through her mind, Mars burning, children pulled from shattered domes, diplomats murdered in vacuum, and also Earth's history, filled with wars humanity had nearly destroyed itself through before choosing cooperation over annihilation. "We were like them once," she whispered, violent, expansionist, terrified of anything different. "If someone had erased us back then, none of this would exist." The obelisk pulsed slowly. Predator species historical correlation with sentinel species detected. Reassessment initiated. Outside, the Hresk world breaker array reached catastrophic collapse vector. The sun began to fold inward. Solar gravity spiked. Planetary orbits destabilized by microscopic but escalating margins. Human orbital defense networks screamed as entire constellations of satellites tore apart under tidal shear. Commander Tolrek staggered to his feet, horror burning through every nerve. Commander Joravan cried. If the star collapses, the lattice might not stop it in time. Tolrek stared at Earth through the projection and realized something with chilling clarity. Humanity was not trying to win. They were trying to spare their enemy, while their own son was being murdered. Inside the brood sovereign, the Speaker Prime sensed the lattice's hesitation. For the first time, the collective detected the possibility of victory. Increased power output, complete stellar collapse. Every surviving Hresk ship redirected reactor cores into the Worldbreaker array. The gravitational implosion wave surged exponentially, warping Sol's heliosphere into a spiraling funnel towards singular collapse. The sun dimmed across Earth, twilight fell in the middle of day. Millions looked skyward as solar light flickered like a dying candle. Leona felt the lattice's final evaluation window closing. The presence pressed against her consciousness again, vast and incomprehensible. Sentinel species must define acceptable resolution, define balance. Her heart pounded like war drums. Balance, not victory, not revenge, balance. She thought of every child on Earth, every Martian survivor, every unknown alien civilization that might one day rise without knowing humanity had saved or doomed them. She spoke with quiet, absolute conviction. "Stop their attack," she said. "Destroy the weapons, disable their fleets, but spare their species." The presence pulsed, analyzing. "Predator species will re-attack with probability 72.4%. Then we'll face them again," she said. Moreau stared at her, as if she had gone mad. Leona continued, voice trembling but unwavering. "That's what being alive means. You don't erase threats from existence. You prove there's another path." Silence stretched across dimensions. For a terrible moment, nothing responded. Then the obelisk flared with a resonance that shook mountains. Sentinel species, mercy directive accepted. Limited correction authorized. Across Sol, the lattice ignited fully. Dark geometric rings unfolded through higher dimensional vectors, aligning directly around the Hresk Worldbreaker array. The result was instantaneous and incomprehensible. The gravitational implosion wave froze mid-formation, suspended like a sculpted spiral of collapsed space. Then the lattice pulsed. Every Hresk reactor core linked to the array simply shut down, not exploded, not melted. Their fusion reactions ceased, as if the laws enabling nuclear fusion had been temporarily revoked around them. Entire warships drifted powerless, their technology rendered inert by localized constant alteration. Then the lattice expanded one final harmonic wave. Millions of Fresk vessels across the swarm experienced simultaneous system failure. Weapons disassembled at molecular coherence points. Propulsion drives folded into harmless inert mass. Communication nodes severed from the collective's hive-mind network. The brood sovereign itself convulsed as neural command vines lost signal cohesion. For the first time in recorded Hesk history, the collective fractured into individual, terrified consciousness fragments. Commander Tolrek watched in stunned silence as the greatest invasion fleet ever assembled drifted helplessly before Earth, its weapons erased without a single explosion. Jaravan whispered, trembling, "They didn't destroy them." "No," Tolrek said quietly. "They disarmed them." Inside the brood sovereign, the Speaker Prime screamed in isolated panic, cut off from billions of voices that had always defined its existence. Across its sensory field, human fleets approached, not firing, not attacking, simply surrounding the crippled armada like shepherds, guiding wounded predators away from a village. In the Himalayan vault, Leona collapsed to her knees as the obelisk dimmed, returning slowly to dormant geometry. Dr. Moreau rushed forward. "Admiral, you did it. You stopped them." Leona shook her head weakly, staring at the fading black surface. "No," she whispered, "we reminded it what it was built to protect." Above Earth, the sun stabilized, its light returning in steady, golden warmth. The Fresk invasion fleet drifted in silent defeat. But across the galaxy, every civilization watching realized something far more terrifying than humanity's power. Humanity had chosen mercy, while holding the ability to erase entire species from existence. And that choice would change the balance of the galaxy forever. Yet, as Sol calmed, deep within the dormant obelisk, ancient systems recorded a final warning. Predator species, survival probability high, future extinction events possible. Sentinel species will be tested again, and far beyond known galactic borders. Something ancient stirred in response to the lattice's awakening, something that had been waiting to see whether the inheritors of the Aegis Protocol would choose power or wisdom. Silence fell across the Sol system, not the fragile silence of victory, not the stunned quiet of defeat. It was the heavy, sacred stillness that followed catastrophe, narrowly avoided, the kind of silence civilizations remembered for millennia because of what did not happen. The sun burned steadily again, its golden light washing across Earth, Mars, Luna, and the vast human orbital infrastructure like a quiet benediction. Solar radiation readings normalized, gravitational distortions dissipated. The lattice structures surrounding the system slowly rotated out of harmonic alignment, their impossible geometry folding inward, retreating back into the sensor voids from which they had emerged. They did not vanish, they simply slept. Across Sol's outer boundary, the remains of the Resk collective war swarm drifted in stunned paralysis. Millions of warships floated powerless, their once deadly weapon spines inert, propulsion systems cold, command networks fractured. The great swarm that had darkened the stars now resembled a shattered constellation, vast, broken, and utterly vulnerable. For the first time in recorded galactic history, Kresk drone vessels began transmitting individual distress signals. Not tactical data, not war directives, fear. Within the crippled brood sovereign Kasal, the Speaker Prime convulsed in isolated panic, its once unified consciousness splintered into disconnected fragments. Without the hive network, each drone mind experienced individuality and evolutionary condition. The Resk species had lost tens of thousands of years earlier. The result was catastrophic. Thousands of drones collapsed into neurological shock. Others shrieked in alien frequencies that carried raw existential terror. The Speaker Prime, stripped of its omnipresent unity, struggled to comprehend the unfamiliar sensation flooding its thoughts. Loneliness. Human fleets advanced carefully into the debris field. They moved not as conquerors but as medics, entering a battlefield after the guns had fallen silent. Rescue vessels deployed automated stabilization drones around Resk ships, preventing reactor meltdowns, restoring minimal life support functions, and establishing translation nodes for basic communication. Fleet Admiral Rohan Calder stood aboard the flagship U.S. Horizon of Dawn, watching alien warships flicker with emergency lights through reinforced viewport glass. His executive officer stared at the sensor displays in disbelief. "Sir, why are we helping them?" she asked quietly. Calder did not look away from the drifting armada. "Because," he said, voice steady, "we want them to remember who spared them." Inside the iridescent truth, Commander Tolrek watched humanity's actions with profound, bone-deep astonishment. "They are stabilizing the Resk fleet," Joravan whispered. "They could destroy them," the junior adept said hoarsely. "No one would stop them. No council ruling could challenge what we just witnessed." Tolrek's neural crown pulsed with slow, contemplative violeta color, rarely seen among Kylari command ranks. "Yes," he said, "and that is precisely why they will not." He stepped closer to the observation viewport, gazing toward Eartherworld, once dismissed as chaotic and primitive, now revealed as something far older in spirit than the Council had ever imagined. "They have demonstrated ultimate strength," he continued softly. "Now they demonstrate ultimate restraint. Within the Himalayan vault, Admiral Leona Sato sat alone beside the dormant obelisk. The chamber had grown quiet again. Emergency lights dimmed to soft ambient glow. The ancient structure stood motionless, its surface once more seamless, black and unknowable. Dr. Elian Morrow entered cautiously, carrying a datapad filled with post-battle analysis. He paused several meters behind her, hesitant to break the fragile stillness. "You saved them," he said finally. Leona did not turn. "No," she replied softly. "I saved us." Morrow frowned. "They were trying to kill our star, and if we had erased them," she said, voice calm but heavy, "we would have proven that the galaxy was right to fear us." She stood slowly, exhaustion etched into every movement. "Power without mercy isn't protection," she continued, "it's domination. And humanity has spent its entire history learning what happens when one species believes domination is justified." Moreau glanced toward the obelisk, unease lingering in his eyes. "Do you think it understood you?" he asked. Leona studied the dark surface, remembering the presence that had touched her thoughts, vast, ancient, patient. "I think," she said quietly, "it was waiting to see if we understood ourselves." The aftermath rippled outward across the galaxy faster than any fleet. The Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session, their chamber filled with silence that no political maneuvering could mask. For the first time in its long history, the Council faced an existential philosophical crisis. The Lumen Court emissary spoke first, her light dimmed to contemplative silver. "Humanity possesses technology capable of species extinction, yet they chose restraint. This demands re-evaluation of development accords." The Via Dominion warlord remained motionless for several seconds before responding, an unprecedented hesitation for a species defined by military supremacy. "They have demonstrated power exceeding elder civilizations," he admitted, "and moral control exceeding most of them." The Thassary guilds transmitted economic projections across the chamber, their crystalline forms flickering with unprecedented uncertainty. If humanity wished conquest, they could collapse galactic trade infrastructure overnight. Instead, they requested peace. The chamber's attention turned toward the darkened Kylari throne. Commander Tolrek's projection stabilized above it. He spoke with slow, deliberate authority. "The Council has misjudged Sol," he said, "not because humanity is stronger than we believed, but because they are wiser than we feared." Across the shattered Resk fleet, human rescue operations continued. Weeks passed as engineers restored limited propulsion capabilities to allow the swarm to retreat safely beyond Sol's boundary. Human medical teams studied Resk physiology, discovering that the temporary severance of hive consciousness had left psychological scars across the species. For the first time in their evolutionary history, individual Resk minds began forming permanent self-awareness patterns. The collective would never be the same. A single transmission arrived from the crippled brood, Sovereign K. It was fragmented, unstable, translated through human linguistics algorithms with difficulty, but its meaning was unmistakable. Sol species. Why? Spare. Predator. Admiral Calder transmitted Earth's response personally. Because predators can learn not to be predators. The transmission paused for nearly 2 minutes, an eternity for hive-based communication. Then came the reply. Collective. Does not understand. Calder allowed himself a small, tired smile. Neither did we. Not for a very long time. Months later, the final Resk vessels crossed beyond Sol's exclusion boundary. Their swarm formation fractured but intact. They did not broadcast threats. They did not issue declarations. They simply withdrew. For the first time in known galactic history, the Resk collective retreated from conquest without annihilation or total victory. The event would later be known across star systems as the Mercy War. Back on Earth, life resumed with quiet resilience. Cities rebuilt, orbital infrastructure damaged during gravitational distortions. Memorials were erected for the fallen. Children returned to schools, where history lessons now included the day humanity chose mercy over absolute power. The last light directive was sealed once more beneath the Himalayas, its existence remaining classified to most of the population. Only a handful of leaders, scientists, and historians understood the full magnitude of what rested beneath their planet's crust, and they lived with the knowledge that one day it might awaken again. Commander Tolrek's mission concluded 3 standard months after the invasion. As the iridescent truth prepared to depart soul space, he recorded his final report to the Kylari Ascendancy. He stood alone in the vessel's observation chamber, Earth rotating peacefully below like a jewel suspended in cosmic darkness. "This is Commander Tolrek," he began, voice carrying a rare emotional cadence. "Soul species designation must be reclassified immediately. Humanity is not an emergent threat civilization. Humanity is a sentinel civilization, a species that has inherited technology beyond their origin and demonstrated ethical restraint sufficient to wield it responsibly." He paused, studying the vibrant blues and greens of the planet below. "They are dangerous," he continued, "not because of their weapons, but because they believe survival must include compassion." His crown dimmed to reflective violet. Such belief is either the galaxy's greatest hope, or its greatest gamble. Years passed. Trade with Sol gradually reopened under newly negotiated interstellar treaties. Human diplomats entered galactic forums, not as petitioners but as equals, sometimes as uneasy moral anchors during council disputes. The Hres Collective withdrew into internal reconstruction, their species undergoing the most profound evolutionary transformation in their recorded existence. Individual consciousness began spreading among drone castes. War doctrine fractured. Entire hive worlds entered philosophical crisis. Some Hresk historians would later claim that humanity had not defeated them. Humanity had forced them to confront the possibility of becoming something new. But far beyond the Milky Way's spiral arms, in the cold darkness between galactic clusters, ancient monitoring constructs stirred in silent observation. They had watched countless civilizations rise and fall across cosmic ages. They had built the Aegis Protocol long before the Galactic Council existed, long before most stars in the galaxy had formed stable planetary systems. And now, for the first time in millions of years, their sensors registered something unexpected, a sentinel species that had passed the test. Fragments of ancient communication awakened, transmitting through dimensions untouched by conventional space. Successor civilization confirmed. Sentinel inheritance protocol preparing. Observation continues. Back on Earth, Admiral Leona Sato stood atop a quiet coastal cliff, overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the same ocean that had once hidden the artifact that nearly changed the fate of the galaxy. She had retired from military command months earlier, though her name would echo through human history for centuries. The sunset painted the horizon in burning gold, as waves rolled gently against dark volcanic rock. Dr. Moreau joined her, hands in his coat pockets, eyes tired but peaceful. "The Council wants to open joint research initiatives," he said. "They want to study the lattice carefully this time." Leona smiled faintly. "They still don't understand it, do we?" he asked. She watched the endless ocean for a long moment. "No," she admitted. "And maybe that's why we're allowed to use it." Moreau frowned slightly. "Allowed?" Leona's eyes reflected the setting sun. "That thing beneath our feet," she said softly, "isn't a weapon, it's a mirror. It shows civilizations what they truly are when they hold power over extinction." She turned toward him. "And one day, it might decide we've changed." A long silence passed between them as the last light of the sun dipped below the horizon. Far above, unseen by human eyes, the dormant lattice structures rotated slowly in their hidden voids, watching, waiting, listening, guardians or judges. No one on Earth could say for certain. Across the galaxy, the story of humanity spread through trade routes, diplomatic channels, and whispered legends carried by travelers between stars. They were called many things: the silent guardians, the species that refused godhood, the civilization that warned the galaxy, and meant it, and etched into interstellar lore archives, translated into thousands of languages. The final message humanity would forever be known for remained unchanged. "We do not seek to rule the galaxy, we only promise this: attack us again, and we will end the war, permanently. But if you choose peace, we will stand beside you, not above you, in the endless dark between stars." Where civilizations rose and fell like sparks against eternity, the galaxy listened, and for the first time in its violent history, it began to hope.